Hello friends, today we will be listening to the story of Loki orchestrating Baldur's death, preventing his resurrection, and the gods' journey towards Ragnarök. This is one of the most frequently told stories in Norse mythology. This event is not merely the tragedy of a god, it is the spark that ignites the process leading to Ragnarök. And the malevolent genius behind this spark is Loki. Baldur was the son of Odin and Frigg. Baldur was the god of light and innocence. Baldur's existence brought joy and enlightenment to Asgard. Baldur lived with his wife Nanna in the magnificent Breidablik Hall in Asgard. Baldur was the most beloved, purest, and brightest of the Aesir gods. His light illuminated everything. He represented peace, beauty, and goodness. It all begins with Baldur having terrifying nightmares. These dreams foreshadowed his early death and the extinguishing of the light in Asgard. Death, darkness, the inevitable end. The Aesir gods unite to prevent Baldur's death. Baldur's mother, Frigg, undertakes an extraordinary effort to save her son. She makes every living and inanimate thing in the world swear an oath, "You will never harm Baldur." Among these are fire, water, stone, diseases, animals, plants, earth, weapons, even magic. Everything swears an oath not to harm Baldur. The gods are now relieved. Baldur's death seems impossible. Believing that nothing could harm Baldur, the gods started a strange and amusing game in front of Valhalla. Everyone threw things at Baldur: sharp spears, swords, stones, iron. But nothing harmed Baldur. Baldur stood upright. Every weapon that hit him bounced away harmlessly. Baldur and the gods were having fun, except for one person. Loki watched this scene with jealousy and envy. Loki couldn't stand the fact that Baldur was loved and respected by all the gods. He also couldn't stand the fact that Baldur seemed to be protected by a special shield against all dangers. Loki's doubt. Did Frigg really swear allegiance? Loki's mind is constantly filled with doubt and curiosity. The invincibility shield around Baldur drives him mad. Did Frigg really convince everyone? He devises a plan to find out. Loki disguises himself as an old woman and goes to Frigg's palace. Frigg takes the old woman aside and begins to speak. Without revealing it, Loki steers the conversation towards Baldur's invincibility and indirectly asks the most critical question: did everything really swear not to harm Baldur? Frigg replies somewhat proudly and casually, "Yes, everything. There is only one thing. Mistletoe. It was so young and harmless that I didn't take an oath from it." There Loki got what he wanted. And this information will change the fate of the entire universe and the gods. Having achieved his goal, Loki immediately descends to Earth. He finds the small and seemingly harmless mistletoe plant. This plant is the only thing that can harm Baldur. Loki cuts it off, sharpens it like a spearhead, and strengthens it with magic. He prepares an arrow and a spear that will bring death to Baldur. One day, while the gods were again having fun throwing weapons and stones at Baldur, Loki came to Baldur's brother, Hodur. Hodur was blind and could not participate in his brother's weapon-throwing game because he lacked the eyes to aim. This time, Loki had disguised himself as a young man. Loki asks Hodur why he doesn't join his brother's fun. Hodur said sadly, "I am blind. I cannot see the target. I don't even have a weapon to hit the target." Loki, giving Hodur the deadly mistletoe, said, "I will guide you. With this staff you can join your brother's revelry. Nothing can harm Baldur anyway." Hoder rejoiced at the opportunity to join his brothers and the gods' revelry. Hoder, guided by Loki, threw the spear at Baldur. The moment the spear hit Baldur, for the first time, something harmed him. Baldur fell to the ground, mistletoe, the only small, harmless thing that hadn't sworn an oath, pierced his body like a dagger, and the god of light died there. The gods remained in a moment of silence and shock. It was as if the world had stopped. Then screams, mourning, and anger rose. At first, no one blamed Hoder. He had no ill intentions. The gods soon realized that the real culprit was Loki. Loki fled, but he earned the hatred of everyone in Asgard. Baldur's death brought darkness and deep sorrow to Asgard. The gods held a magnificent funeral for Baldur on the Hringhorn, the largest ship of the Vikings. Nanna, unable to bear the pain of her husband's death, died there from heartbreak and was burned with him. The gods pleaded with Hel, queen of the dead, to bring Baldur back from the underworld. Hermod conveyed their plea to Hel. Hel agreed to return Baldur, but on the condition that every living and inanimate thing in every corner of the 9 realms weep for Baldur. If even one being refused to weep, Baldur would remain in Helheim. Hermod returned to Asgard, and the gods demanded tears from every being that was supposed to weep for Baldur. Indeed, gods, giants, humans, animals, the entire universe mourned and wept at the loss of the god of light. However, it was finally discovered that an old and ugly giant lived in the cave. This giant's name was Tuk. Tuk obeyed the gods' wishes and then refused them. Tuk's cruel and heartless refusal was Loki's final blow. Tuk was none other than Loki. By preventing Baldur's return, Loki ensured that the god's suffering would be permanent. Baldur's death was an irreversible catastrophe for the gods. With the death of Baldur, the god of light, the universe is thrown into imbalance. Light dies, and the inevitable future of Ragnarök is triggered. Loki's treachery is the beginning of one of the most critical events in Norse mythology. The gods, in rage, began searching for him. Loki, to escape the wrath of the gods, quickly fled to a mountain. There he built a house with 4 doors, so he could see the dangers that could come from every direction. Hearing that the gods were plotting to capture him, Loki transformed himself into a salmon and hid in a deep pool at the waterfall to escape capture. The gods found a fishing net in what they thought was his house. Kvasir, the god of wisdom, realized that this net was a clue to how Loki had disguised himself. The gods took the net and threw it into the waterfall. Loki leaped to the surface to escape the net, but Thor caught him in midair. Even though Loki tried to escape in his fish form, Thor held him tightly by his tail. Before the gods led Loki to the cave where he would suffer his punishment, they carried out the first and most brutal stage of their vengeance. They transformed Loki's son, Narfi, into a wolf. The wolf-like Narfi attacked his brother Valin, tearing him to pieces. Thor used Valin's intestines to chain Loki to 3 large rocks. Thor hung a venomous snake directly above Loki's head. The venom dripping from the snake's mouth fell onto Loki's face, causing him unbearable pain. Loki's wife, Sigyn, stood beside him, trying to catch the drops of venom with the small bowl. When the bowl overflowed, Sigyn had to move away to empty it. At that moment, poison would drip onto Loki's face, causing him to writhe in agony and trigger earthquakes that shook the entire world. This torment of Loki would continue until Ragnarök began. Thor is the one who nailed the chains, made from Loki's son's intestines, to the massive rocks, securing Loki so he could not escape. Thor also secured the serpent's head that dripped onto Loki's face. During his punishment, Loki shouts, "When the apocalypse comes, Thor will be the first to kill." Loki will break free from his chains and take the side of the giants against the gods in the final battle. Baldur's death is a symbol in Norse mythology of the disruption of the cosmic order and the inevitability of Ragnarök. Hodur's fate. Hodur is a blind god. While his brother Baldur represents light, beauty, and joy, Hodur represents darkness, silence, and exclusion. Baldur's love and immunity from the gods make him the center of attention in Asgard. But Hodur, due to his blindness, cannot participate in the gods' revelries. He stands sadly and ostracized outside of the ring game, where the other gods throw objects at Baldur. This situation makes Hodur the perfect tool for Loki's treacherous plan. While Hodur wants to join his brother's revelry, he becomes a fratricide because of Loki's evil scheme. Hodur's actions are entirely innocent. He has no malicious intent. However, once the Aesir gods recovered from the initial shock, they saw that Hodur was responsible for this great crime. Even when Loki was found guilty, the gods did not forgive Hodur, because Baldur's death was such a wound that revenge, justice, courage, grief, all emotions were mixed together. Odin creates a warrior veil to kill Hodur in order to avenge Baldur. This warrior is born in a day, grows in a day, matures in a day for rage and revenge, and on that day, Veil finds and kills Hodur. Hodur's death is swift and inevitable, like a punishment of fate. Even in his last moments, Hodur dies uttering Baldur's name. With Baldur's death, joy, security, and light vanished from Asgard. This foreshadowed the moral decay and winter that would sweep through the pre-Ragnarök world. How did Loki escape his chains? Ever since Loki was captured and bound in that terrible cave, he writhed and groaned, trying to escape the snake that dripped poison onto his face. Each time the poison fell on Loki's face, he cried out in terror. The power of these cries was so great that it is believed that the earthquakes of the world were caused by Loki's struggles. Loki's liberation is not the result of will or plan, but an inevitable consequence of fate. There is a clear statement made by Edda. When Ragnarök approaches, Loki's chains will be broken. The drops of poison engulfed Loki's body, and his struggles loosened the rocks. Now, when Loki tightened his chains, the stones no longer resounded with a thud, but the cracks groaned. The first great sign of Ragnarök is the unleashing of the colossal death ship, Naglfar. This ship is a semi-living being made of nails, death, hatred, and curses. It is made of the uncut nails of the dead, the most ominous vessel of the Jotun world, and can only set sail when the order of the world collapses. The moment Naglfar's chains break, it creates such a great tremor that the rocks beneath Loki's cave also crack at the same time. So Loki's salvation is not just an individual event, but a moment of universal rupture. The earthquakes intensify. Even Sigyn can no longer hold the poison cup. She is forced to flee from the collapsing rocks. The rage and pain rising from Loki's body merge. A single cry shatters all the rocks. The rage and pain rising from Loki's body merge. A single cry shatters all the rocks. The bonds that bind him to the rocks break, and Loki leaps to his feet. The serpent's head falls and the poison spills onto the ground. This rupture is not silent. It is heard like a scream in every corner of the world. When Loki rose, his face was now scorched with poison, his eyes darkened, and his hair rages like flames. There was no trace of his former cunning. only hatred, revenge, and fate itself remained. As soon as he broke free from his chains, Loki descended to Helheim, for there he needed to gather his army. The gates of hell opened, and the dead lined up behind Loki in armies. Loki was no longer a deceiver, but a general of death, and he sailed north to take the helm of the Naglfar. The giant captain was waiting for Loki to steer the ship. Loki, with the winds that twist like serpents, with the fire giants, with the dead of hell, he unites the giant armies and takes the bow of the ship. Naglfar has torn apart the shores of the world and crushed its walls, advancing upon Asgard. Ragnarök did not begin in an instant. It was a gradual process, tearing apart the fabric of the world. The sun disappeared and snow fell incessantly. For 3 years, summer did not come. Humanity began to kill each other. This is the moral collapse of the world. When Loki was freed, the other cosmic prisons also began to unravel. The giant wolf broke the chains that the gods had previously bound it with Gleipnir and opened its mouth wide to the heavens. The World Serpent that roams the depths of the seas suddenly rises. The ocean overflows, the shores disappear. The sky darkens as Jörmungandr spews poison. The crash of Naglfar into Asgard. When the chaos of Ragnarök engulfed the world, before the universe was completely plunged into darkness, a rumbling sound was heard approaching on the distant horizon. This sound was the shattering roar of Naglfar, the cursed ship made of the nails of the dead. As the terrible rumbling grew, the sky of the 9 realms stretched, the trees shook, the seas churned. A black shadow began to grow on the dark horizon. As the shadow widened, a terrifying crackle echoed through the heavens. Finally, Naglfar's chains had broken. As Naglfar advanced, the seas tore apart like canals. Even the storm gods could not control the wind. Giants climbed the masts of the ship with shouts of attack. The screams of the dead souls echoed in the heavens. Now there was only the roar of destruction in the atmosphere. The gods were preparing for war. Even the gods shuddered when Naglfar's dark silhouette appeared on the horizon of Asgard. Thor raised Mjolnir to the sky. Lightning bolts began to erupt, one after another. Freyr takes a battle stance, knowing he will face death against Surtr. Tyr grits his teeth and marches toward Fenrir. Odin, atop Sleipnir, raises his spear, Gungnir. When the moment of destiny arrived, the ship approached the shores of Asgard. A great cosmic crash was heard. The prow of the Naglfar struck the walls of Asgard, gleaming with the help of the wind and Loki's cursed spells. The collision was so devastating that the walls of Asgard cracked. The ground split open. The sky briefly darkened. The stars lost their light. The gods recoiled a few steps from this colossal blow. From the dark hull of the ship emerged giant armies, waves of the souls of the dead, the ice warriors of Jotunheim, the lost children of Helheim, and finally, Loki, with the fire of vengeance in his eyes. Loki smiled and said, "I've returned home, Father." When Odin heard these words, a silent chill fell. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. Now, let's look at the wars between the most powerful gods. In the middle of Ragnarök, 2 ancient destinies awaited each other. Odin, the god of wisdom, war, and order. Fenrir, the giant wolf of chaos, savagery, and freedom that broke the god's oath. This encounter was the clash of the universe's destinies. Freed from his chains, Fenrir began to run towards Asgard. Every step of Fenrir collapsed the ground, uprooted trees, split mountains in two. His mouth was so wide that His upper jaw touched the sky. His lower jaw touched the earth. With every step, fire, mud, and blood splattered. In his eyes burned the madness of a rage that had been chained for years, and Odin knew his coming. Odin descended from the sky on Sleipnir. The entire army of Einherjar from Valhalla stood behind Odin. But Odin knew this battle was only between the two of them. Fenrir hated only Odin among the gods because Odin had him chained. Odin attacked Fenrir with his spear, but he did not stop the wolf. Fenrir, empowered by his rage, did not even feel the wound. In an instant, Fenrir leaped into the air. His mouth opened like a dark cave. The wolf seized Odin by the shoulder. Not a single scream was heard. With a single bite, Fenrir swallowed Odin. The gods froze in horror. Only one god remained silent, Vidar, the god of silence. Odin's youngest son, Vidar, understood that the moment of his destiny had arrived. Vidar stepped forward. Each step carved a crater in the ground. He wore special boots made of giant hides. It was said that Vidar would use these boots to tear Fenrir's mouth open. Now that moment had come. Vidar leaped onto Fenrir. He pressed one foot against Fenrir's lower jaw. He pinned the other foot under the upper jaw. He pressed with all his might. Fenrir howled. This howl was heard throughout all 9 realms. Vidar, holding Fenrir's upper jaw with one hand, drew the divine dagger given by the gods with the other. The tip of the dagger was aimed at Fenrir's heart. He plunged the dagger into Fenrir's chest. Then, with even greater force, Vidar tore Fenrir's jaw apart. It was like a cosmic tear. The wolf trembled, and with one last breath, Fenrir was dead. Odin's revenge had been taken. Thor, clutching Mjolnir tightly, ran towards the west coast. There he knew his fate awaited him. And from the sea, a shadow rose, encompassing the boundaries of the World Serpent. When the World Serpent rose from the sea at the very beginning of Ragnarök, the world trembled as if it were about to split in two. The waters rushed to its side, the land collapsing under its weight. The serpent seemed to have gone mad with rage. The vengeance that had been imprisoned beneath the sea for years was now unleashed. A clash of lightning and poison. When Thor raised Mjolnir to the sky, thunder roared. Jörmungandr's eyes gleamed blood red. The drops of poison that sprang from his mouth melted the earth as they fell. The world held its breath as the two ancient enemies stared at each other. Then, Thor ran, the serpent attacked, and the sound of conflict in the universe was heard. Thor swung his hammer with such force that it split the air and struck Jörmungandr's head like a lightning bolt. The serpent's enormous archive was thrown back, but Jörmungandr was not a creature to surrender easily. Black poison gushed from the wound on his head. He let out a furious roar. Jörmungandr opened his enormous jaws and spewed a cloud of poison upon Thor. This poison was a curse that darkened the color of the air, turned the waters black, and melted even the souls of living beings. A wave of poison completely engulfed Thor. When the gods saw this from afar, they thought it was all over. Thor had survived, but there was pain on his face. This poison would kill him. It was only a matter of time. Thor leaped and climbed onto Jörmungandr's back. The giant serpent coiled and tried to throw him off. Thor struck the serpent repeatedly with his hammer. Each blow was powerful enough to shatter a continent. The giant rings of the World Serpent crashed onto the shore, destroying the coasts. Black smoke rose above the water. The battle was so devastating that the other gods had to stand and watch, because it was impossible to intervene between these two world-shattering forces. Thor gathered all his strength. He let out a scream toward the sky, and Thor brought his hammer down on Jörmungandr's head once more, but this time for the last time. Jörmungandr's body trembled and fell to the ground with a tremendous crash. The World Serpent was dead. Thor stood tall. For a moment, victory was his. As the World Serpent fell, it twisted one last time. Its poisonous blood gushed in all directions. This blood rained down on Thor. Thor propped himself up, leaning on his hammer. His chest swelled, his breath shortened, his knees trembled. He took a step, then another. He moved 9 steps away from Jörmungandr's corpse. On the 9th step, he looked up at the sky. A final flash of lightning struck. Thor died from the venom of the creature he had killed. As Ragnarök raged with all its might, the two figures faced each other. One was the last guardian of order, the other, the architect of chaos. Both knew, in this battle, not just one would die, both would die. Heimdall stood there. Loki laughed. His laughter held both madness and sorrow. Heimdall raised his sword. In an instant, he lunged at Loki like lightning. Just as the sword was about to strike Loki's chest, Loki dodged the attack, twisting his body like smoke. Evasion was Loki's mastery. Loki instantly split into 10 figures surrounding Heimdall. Heimdall hesitated for a moment. Just a moment. It was then that Loki revealed his true form, plunging his knee-length dagger into Heimdall's shoulder. Heimdall staggered. Heimdall struck his sword to the ground, and a flash of light erupted. Loki was forced to close his eyes. Because the falsehood of light would destroy illusion, lies. Loki's clones had vanished into thin air. The real Loki appeared. Heimdall seized the opportunity. He swung his sword at chest level. Loki recoiled, but his sword pierced his stomach deeply. Despite his wound, Loki lunged at Heimdall. Heimdall raised his sword. Loki aimed his dagger. Loki struck Heimdall's neck with the dagger, leaving a deep scar. But at the same moment, Heimdall plunged his sword into Loki's chest. A fiery rift opened at the southern edge of the world towards Muspelheim. As the rift widened, a redness appeared, covering the entire sky. This redness was a scorching, dark, and gnawing light. As fire rose in the sky like giant waves, a figure emerged from within. This figure was none other than Surtr, the Lord of Flames. A human being created by the Lord of Flames, but larger in mass than even giants. His hair was a fiery torrent. His skin shone like hot coals, and there was a white, warm gleam in his eyes. He held the sword, created with the first rule of the universe. It was said to be brighter than the sun. When Surtr raised his sword, the sky split open like a rift. This sword was born to bring about the end of the world. When Surtr stepped, the earth turned to glass, the oceans boiled, the air filled with smoke to the point of being unbreathable. Even the gods recoiled at the sound of his approach. As Surtr advanced, only one god appeared before him, Freyr, the god of light, fertility, and spring. Freyr, the symbol of peace. He had to fight Surtr, the Lord of Fire, but his most powerful weapon, the lightsaber, had long since been taken from him. The clash erupted like an earthquake. Sparks flew to the heavens every time Freyr's spear touched Surtr's fiery skin. Surtr's counterstrikes melted the earth and ignited the air. Every second of the battle meant the apocalypse accelerating a little more. For a while, Freyr managed to hold out. Finally, Surtr's sword struck Freyr in the chest, drawing a fiery crescent. The sky shrieked as Freyr fell. As the god of nature died, all life crumbled. The green of the world faded. With Freyr's last breath, there was no power left to stop the world. Surtr walked to the center of Asgard. While the gods clashed with Loki and the giants, Surtr didn't even look at them. His task wasn't to fight, but to bring about the end. Surtr raised his sword to the sky with both hands. Surtr's sword drew a line of flame that cut across the sky. Then, with a single giant blow, the world was engulfed in fire. A wave of flames reached every corner of the universe. Mountains were engulfed in lava. Forests instantly turned to ash. Oceans turned to steam. As gods, giants, and monsters clashed, Surtr's flames began to devour them all. The fire, without distinction, destroyed everything: life, death, god, giant, man, sea, mountain, sky, time, fate, everything. These flames were not an outburst of anger, but a command for renewal. For the final stage of Ragnarök was purification, and Surtr was the instrument of this purification. The world finally fell completely silent. Time stopped. As the ashes scattered in the wind, Surtr's sword finally began to fade. The Lord of the Flames had completed his task. He too dissolved and vanished within the fire that consumed him. Thus, the old world came to an end, and its ashes would later pave the way for the birth of a new world. The birth of the new world and the return of Baldur. As the remnants of the old world turned to ashes and scattered, silence fell, a sacred, ancient silence. When the fury of fire subsided, only shimmering darkness remained. The world took shape once more. New lines appeared on the earth. Rivers flowed, mountains rose again. This was a completely new creation. Grass sprouted from beneath the ashes. The sky turned a clear blue. There were no more giants. There was no more war. The fury of fire was over. Old betrayals were left behind. The world was reborn. Two people survived at the sacred root of a tree, Leif and Lifthrasir. These two humans, fleeing the great destruction, were hidden by a tree where fire could not find them. They emerged from the tree on the first morning of the new world. They quenched their hunger with dewdrops. A new humanity would be born from them. As the world breathed again, the gates of hell opened. A light rose from the depths. Baldur emerged from within this light. When Baldur's footsteps touched the earth, the places where he stepped shone. His light was the new sun of the world. There was no hatred, no curse. Hodr walked behind him. Baldur placed his hand on Hodr's shoulder. This scene is the spirit of the post-Ragnarök world. Forgiven pain, cleansed destiny, a past healed in peace. Baldur was no longer just the god of beauty and justice, but the god of a new age. Not all the gods had perished. They had reunited with the surviving gods. Odin's son Vidar and the governor, Thor's sons Magni and Modi, had survived. These young gods would usher in an age of wisdom and renewal. Baldur's light ushered in a new era. Now, the gods would be guides to humanity, not superiors. The new world would be one where harmony and light reigned. Baldur's return is the greatest reconciliation in world history. His return shows that light does not disappear even after death.